Poverty in India. What is poverty? Poverty is a state or a condition in which a person is going to lack the financial resources. He is not having financial resources and essentials for minimum standard of living. Poverty is related with the standard of living. He is lacking with the conditions essential for the standard of living. What are the conditions? Financial resources and essential conditions. Essentials. It means that the income level from employment is so low that the basic human needs cannot be met. So low. What is poverty? In order to meet the standard of living, the conditions required are financial and then we have essentials. But this is not fulfilled because the income level is so low. Amartya Sen is having a definition for the poverty. Next, we have to see the poverty definition by Amartya Sen. Poverty is deprivation of basic capabilities of life rather than mere lowness of income. Instead of focusing on the income, why Amartya Sen definition is important. Poverty means poor means they are having low income, right? Instead of focusing on the income, there is a deprivation of basic capabilities. They can't do basic things in their life. Basic capabilities of life. There is a deprivation of the basic capabilities of the life. That is what poverty refers to. So poverty refers to we have a deprivation of the basic capabilities of the life. And we be having rather than lowness of the income. Right. That is what we say it as poverty. So poverty refers to there is a deprivation of the basic capabilities of the life. We are deprived of the basic capabilities of the life rather than nearness of lowness of the income. What is the poverty gap rate? It tells about the depth of the poverty. Poverty gap divided by the poverty line is the poverty gap rate. It is how much depth they are in poverty. So this is the poverty line. This much of gap is present, right? So in what depth of the poverty they are present? So poverty gap, this is the gap, right? So the poverty gap divided by the poverty line is what we get it as the poverty gap rate. So this is known as the poverty gap rate. It tells about the depth of the poverty. Now we have to look into the types of poverty. We have seen the introduction of what is poverty. Here they are generally measured, including the minimum standard of living is the term which they are including, right? So standard of living is the term which they are including in the poverty. It means that the income level from the employment is so low. Amartya Sen focuses on deprivation of basic capabilities of their life instead of focusing on the lowness of the income. Now, what is poverty gap? Poverty gap rate is poverty gap divided by the poverty line. Right. In types of poverty, we have like absolute, relative, situational, generational, multidimensional. We have 5 types of the poverty. Absolute poverty is they are lacking the basic means to survival. Lacking the standard of life is lacking. Standard of living, the essentials are lacking. Right. So this is what we have the absolute poverty. Relative poverty is when you are comparing is what relative poverty. Situational poverty because of some situations you became poor. Generational poverty is through the generations. Multidimensional poverty. So absolute, relative, situational and generational. Absolute, relative, situational and then we have the generational and multidimensional poverty. The conditions for absolute poverty and multidimensional poverty are more or less similar, right? So we have the types of poverty like absolute, relative, situation, generation, multidimensional are the conditions, or the classifications of types of the poverty. In absolute poverty, as we have already said, that they are going to lack the basic means of basic means to survive. They are going to lack the basic means to survive. Lacking of the basic means to survive is what we have the absolute poverty is. Right. Lack the basic means to survive is going to be like we have a shelter, right? When we go to the home, we ask for food, water, and then it needs to have sanitation. Food, drinking water, safe drinking water, sanitation, education, shelter. When we are having good food, automatically health, education, and information. These are the parameters required for a basic means of survival. What are the parameters required? The first one is a shelter. Shelter, food, water. Food, water, sanitation. Because of the food, we are getting health and sanitation. Right? Health, education. And once education is obtained, we need information as well. So these are the conditions for absolute poverty. What are the conditions for the relative poverty? When people in a country do not enjoy a certain minimum standard of living as compared to the rest of the population, it is closely related with the issues of inequality. Right? This is related to relative poverty is related to inequality. Right? As compared to the rest of the population, minimum level of living standards as compared to the when we have certain people, they have minimum level of standards, minimum level of living standards. When people have minimum level of living standards compared to whom you are comparing, compared to the rest of the population. Right. When we have people, they are having low living standards, which is compared to the rest of the population. People with low living standards, which is compared to the rest of the population, we are having the poverty. Relative poverty. So absolute poverty versus the relative poverty, right? Absolute poverty, and then we have the relative poverty. When in relative poverty, we have people. And these people are having minimum standards. They are not telling low standards. They are having minimum standard of living. When we are comparing it with, we need to tell the rich, we should not tell rich people. We need to tell that rest of the people, rest of the masses. When we compare, certain people are having poor, not poor, minimum standard of living. Right? So such a thing is inequality, which reflects, relative poverty, which reflects inequality. Now, what is Gini coefficient? Is used to measure the relative poverty. How does how does relative poverty is measured? Is there a way to measure relative poverty? We need to tell the Gini coefficient is used to measure this relative poverty. Situation. Because of situations like crash market collapsing, earthquakes, floods, illness, etc. Right. What is situational poverty? Because of adversities we face like the earthquakes, floods, illness. Adversities like the earthquakes. Flood is an adversity, and then we have illness is an adversity. Right. So because of such adversities, we are having situational poverty. Then generational poverty. See, when we have, let us consider this as layers of generation. People living in layers of generation. When this is like this is the father or mother generation, right? Father and son. Let us imagine this is a grandfather, father and son. Grandfather was very poor, he took a loan. Now this son has to repay the loan, right? So instead of him spending for his son's education, he spends his entire life in repaying this loan. This was an emergency loan, okay? But this grandfather has given education to him, basic education to read and write. But this person even could not provide basic education because there were high interest rates for this loan. And this person now he comes over here and he is not having his basic facilities due to a reason that his father's income was devoted to the loan which his grandfather took. Right. So this is what generational poverty. It is handed over to individuals from their generations. There is a handing over of the poverty. As wealth is also handed over through generations, similarly, poverty is handed throughout the generations, right? This is what we call it as a generational poverty. We have situational poverty and generational poverty. So, in the types of the poverty, we have seen like absolute poverty, relative poverty, situational poverty, and generational poverty. What is a multidimensional poverty? It is made up of multiple factors like poor health, lack of education, inadequate living standard, etc. And categorizing poverty. Again, when we are classifying the poverty, we have to look into like chronic poverty and transient poor. Chronic poor and transient poor. So, always poor. Usually they are poor. See, 3 out of 4 is poor. 4 out of 4 is poor. And churning poor is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 4 out of 8 is poor, is what we have churning poor. Occasionally poor, only one time they have been poor. So 1 out of 4, never poor. Right. Transient is when we have churning poor and occasionally poor is what we have the transient poor. Always poor or they are usually poor. Can you see? 4 by 4 is always poor. 3 by 4 is only one time they are being above poverty line. The remaining times they are being poor. So always you are poor. Usually you are poor. Two types of words. Always and usually. Right. Always poor. Usually they are poor. Always. Usually. Always they are poor and usually they are poor. Right. So always and usually. Churning and occasionally poor. The next kind of categories are churning poor and occasionally poor. So we have always and usually. Then we have churning poor and occasionally poor. So churning poor and occasionally poor are transient poor. Churning is up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Occasionally is 1 by 4. Occasionally is opposite for usually is 3 by 4, but occasionally is 1 by 4. Just only one time they are poor is what we call it as occasionally poor. Churning poor and occasionally poor belongs to the transient poverty. Transient poor. Usually poor and always poor belongs to the chronic poor. For the transient poor, it is churning and occasionally. Churning poor is people who are always poor and those who are usually poor but who may sometimes have a little more money. Usually poor but sometimes they are having a little more money. Example, casual workers are grouped under together as a chronic poor. Churning poor, who regularly move in and out of the poverty. For example, small farmers and seasonal workers. In and out of the poverty is what we have the churning poor. And occasionally poor is who are rich most of the time but may occasionally have a bad luck. It is what we call it as a transient poor. Vicious cycle of the poverty. When we look into the vicious cycle of the poverty, how does development and growth, between development and growth, when they are having a low investment, low economic growth, therefore they give this low income to the wages. Low income means low wages as being provided, right? And because of this they are also low savings. So how is this a cycle? First we have low investment. The investment level is low. Then we have low economic growth. Low investment. And investment means a company, right? They give low wages to the workers. Low wages or low income. And they themselves save low. Right? This is what we will be having it as a cycle. It begins with a low investment and low economic growth, right? Low wages and low savings. From this wage again we are developing another cycle where development, when that salaried person is getting low wages, he is going to have low level of the income, right? Because of the low level of the income he is going to have low in terms of education, and we have the health. He has low for education and he has low for the health as well. So we say that there is a low for education and then we have the health, right? When there is a low level of income, there is a low for health and education. So human capital, we are dealing about the human capital is low. Therefore, they have low productivity. Human capital and low productivity. This cycle is still continuing. So when we say that there is a low level of the income, when the income is low, the health and education becomes less. When health and education are primary for the human capital in turn gives out the productivity. Right. So the human capital is responsible for productivity. And again we have a low income because they are yielding low productivity. This is what the cycle. Why we have low income? Because we have a low economic growth, and low savings because we have low investments. This is a poverty trap, right? So as of now, we just see few concepts which are easy to remember and they are very basics, like the concepts like churning poor and transient poor and chronic poor. In chronic poor we'll be having always and usually. Always poor, usually poor. In transient we looked for the churning poor and occasionally poor. Then when we looked into the types of the poverty, right, we have like absolute poverty, relative poverty, right? Generational poverty, situational poverty, and multidimensional poverty. We saw all the types of poverty as well. And for the relative poverty, which measures inequality, we have the Gini coefficient. We need to have a mark of this. For relative poverty alone, we had Gini coefficient. Right. Next, the poverty gap rate. Poverty gap divided by the poverty line is the poverty gap rate. It tells you about the depth of the poverty. This is what we see as a basic concepts. Now, when we look into the poverty estimation in India, pre-independence, what happened in the pre-independence? The poverty estimation is by Dadabhai Nehruji. Dadabhai Nehruji is writing poverty and un-British rule in India. We have pre-independence. First thing about poverty estimation is we need to tell that it is pre-independence. We have Dadabhai Nehruji. Dadabhai Nehruji is telling about poverty. The word poverty is being mentioned. Okay. Poverty and un-British. Remove the British rule in India. Poverty and un-British rule in India. Formulated the poverty ranging from rupees 16 to 35 per capita per year based on 1867-68 prices. Used the cost of substitute diet consisting of rice, vegetables, mutton and oil. Subsistent diet. This diet consisted of rice, vegetables, mutton, non-veg, non-veg and then oil as well. Right. Dadabhai Nehruji is giving an estimate of per capita per year. Per person per year is what? Per capita per year, right? Per year itself you can be enough with 16 rupees to 35 rupees. 16 to 35 is for per year according to 18. It is 1867-68 prices. Right. Not even 1900s. 1800s it's 60 rupees to 35 rupees is enough for per capita per year. So what we have understood so far, Dadabhai Nehruji, right? Dadabhai Nehruji in the pre-independence time we'll be having the Dadabhai Nehruji. And the book name is Poverty and Un-British Rule in India. Right. Poverty and Un-British Rule in India. This is for the Dadabhai Nehruji in pre-independence time. And he has estimated that rupees 16 to 35 per person is what we say it as per capita per year. This is according to the late 19th century. That is, we have late 19th means 1850 plus, right? So 1867 to 68. At least we should remember that it is late 19th century. Late 19th century, right? So 1867 to 68. Used the cost of subsistence diet is going to consist of the rice, vegetables, mutton and oil. Then National Planning Committee is first in 1938. Then we have the Bombay Committee. So the National Planning Committee is first. Then we have in pre-independence time we will be having the Dadabhai Nehruji. This is also pre-independence time. We have the National Planning Commission. Then comes the Bombay Commission. Per month itself, what is required in 1938? That 15 rupees is required. To 20 rupees per capita per month is required. Also formulated the poverty line based on the minimum standard of living. So here itself we are having the standard of living. What we have to remember for the exam. How do they ask? So like a match the following. What did Dadabhai Nehruji told? Or ascending and descending order. When we are going from ascending order, we have Dadabhai Nehruji first. Then we have the National Planning Committee in 1938. After that, we have the Bombay Plan of 1944. 1867, he was telling certain things related to 1867-68, right? In National Planning Committee, per month itself, you require 15 to 20 rupees. And here, they are telling the standard of living, minimum standard of the living. We have the Bombay plan, right? Bombay plan is the poverty line is for year they are calculating 75 per capita per year. So 15 to 20 per month. But Bombay plan is 75 per year is enough, right? If 15 means for 10, for 12, if you consider 15 means for 12 months it is 180 rupees. But half of this, not even half, I mean little slighter half of this is what suggested by the Bombay Plan in 1944, the poverty line of rupees 75 per capita per head. Because here, why it is so costly? Because they consider the standard of living. This is very important because they will ask chronology wise. The first one is going to be Dadabhai Nehruji, second one is the National Planning Committee 1938, and third one is Bombay Plan. Post independence also working group poverty line. There is a group which is working for the poverty line. So how will you remember this? Working group. And then we have the poverty line. 1962. 1962 Indo-China War, you have to remember. And 1971 exactly Indo-Pakistan War. 1962, 1971, 1979, right? 1993 and 2009, and Saxena is also 2009. Angarajan is 2012. Up to this, that's all. Just half a page of information, right? How are you going to process those information? First, there was a group. That group was working group, poverty line. For the poverty line, 1962, 1971, 1979, and then we have 2000, 1993, 2009, 1993, and then we have the 2009. 9 is following, and 2012 is the last date which we have to remember. Right. There was a working group, and for the poverty line, this was in 1962. Working group poverty line. The national minimum for the each household of 5 persons should not be less than 100 rupees per month for rural and 125 for urban in 1960-61 prices. Excluded the expenditure on health and education. At 1920, 60 and 61, they are excluding health and education, right? Now we could not exclude health and education. 1961, 1960, 61. So in 1962, they are having the report. Working group. There is a group for the poverty line. They say that a family of 5 persons. A family of 5 persons must need 100 rupees per month. And 125 rupees per month for the rural. This is for the rural and this is for the urban. This is what we say it as a working group poverty line. 1960 to 61. Right. We have the working group. Poverty line. National minimum for each household of 5 persons. So when we recall it, what did Dadabhai Nehruji said? 16 to 35 rupees per year is enough. Right. Whereas we have 1867-68. Next we have the National Planning Committee 1938. Per month they told 15 to 20 rupees per month. Bombay Plan. Then we have the working group poverty line. After the working group, we'll be having the Dandekar and Rath. In 1971, we have Dandekar and then the Rath Committee. It is based on the National Sample Survey data. 10 years before data they are using. And they are the first to recommend the calorie intake per person to define the poverty line for both the rural and urban India. They are the first to determine the poverty intake. Right. For both the rural and urban, they are giving one poverty line. DAL, dal, right? Dal, when you want dal. TR. Dal, TR. Imagine TR is a brand and dal brand. For dal, you usually go for TR or TSR. Right. For dal, the first one is Dandekar and the Rath is the first people who are suggesting the poverty estimation. Why they are using 10 months? See here, they are using prices range of 1960-61 for the year of 62. But here, why they are using 1960-61 for the year 71? This is because we are going for calories only. They are not going for the prices. They are going for the calories. 10 years the prices would have changed. But here they are not suggesting some price range. Let's say 200 rupees per month. They are suggesting calories of 2250 for both rural and urban. So when Alag is telling that no, we need separate for rural and urban, because rural people, they consume more, they need more calories for working in primary sector, and urban people require less calories is what estimated by Alag committee in 1979, right? Why the base year of Dandekar and Dutt is 1960 and 61? Because they are just focusing on calories and not the prices. As in case of the working group poverty line, they focused on 100 rupees per household in rural and 125 for the urban. In prices is required because they are speaking about money. But here 1960-61, this is the first scientific assessment of poverty estimation. It is based on the first scientific assessment is Dandekar and Rath in 1971. And this is based on the NSS data, right? National Sample Survey data 1960-61. It recommended the daily intake of 2250 calories per person to define the poverty line for both the rural and the urban India. Whereas we have the Alag Committee 1979 is for the Alag Committee, right? They mentioned that 2100 calories alone is enough and 2400 calories for the rural and urban. The calories are different for the rural and urban. In 1979, we have the Alag Committee. Lakkadwala Committee. Tendulkar Committee. Dal, right? Alag and then Lakkadwala Committee. Lakdwala Committee. Recommended the consumption expenditure be calculated based on calorie consumption. Suggested for different poverty line for the state, prescribed a basket of the commodity and measured the poverty in the states. Now, Dandekar and Rath suggested the calories, right? Alag suggested different calories for the rural and urban areas. Now, what we have Lakkadwala committee in 1993, what they are suggesting is that we have calories. Correct. From calories, what they are consuming, right? Consumption expenditure. And this consumption expenditure, therefore, we need a basket of commodities. Consumption expenditure, and then we need a basket of the commodity, right? Different poverty line for each state. So, state also we want a different poverty line because each state the people consume different, right? So, the basket of commodities for states is different. This is what Lakdwala has suggested. The calorie consumption is used for the consumption expenditure calculation through which we have a basket of commodities, and for each state we have a different poverty line. Let us have a different poverty line for each state. Right. So this is what Lakdwala in 1993. Then we have the Tendulkar committee in 2009. Tendulkar. And Saxena in also 2009. So as far as now, let us again recap so that we do not lose the continuity. We are on the flow, just 2 steps ahead, like Tendulkar, Saxena and Rangarajan committee. So we will be completing and we are going for the next topic. Just 2 steps ahead, but since this is an important topic, we are not losing the continuity. Dadabhai Nehruji. 1867-68. Right. What did he do? 16 to 35 rupees per year is enough. Poverty. and un-British rule in India. Right. From the beginning, whatever we have studied, this is the most important concept. Dadabhai Nehruji is the first. The second one is N and the third one is B. NPC 1938, BP 1944. Right. National Planning Committee and Bombay Plan. National Planning Committee has suggested 15 to 20 rupees per month. 75 per year. This is so costly because they are including the standard of living. Right. Next, after independence, when we are going, we have dal. Right. Dal, TR. Before dal, we are going for 1962. 1962 is the starting year and working group for the poverty line. Poverty line, right? So 1960-61 prices they have considered, and they say that 100 rupees per month for a family of 5 in case of the rural and 125 per month for a family of 5 in case of the urban. This is what suggested by the working group poverty line. But we have Dandekar and Rath. In 1971, they are going for poverty line based on calories, 2250 calories. But what did Alak do? He said that the rural is having different calories and urban is having different calories. Right. After Alak, we have Lakdwala. What is so unique about Lakdwala? We are going calories, right? Calorie is being consumed. After that Tendulkar, after Lakdwala, we have Tendulkar and Saxena and Rangarajan committee, right? So when Tendulkar is coming, you need to remember that it is something different. So you should consider that we are speaking continuously about calorie for the third time in the Lakdwala. Now here calorie consumption is present, right? So we need to mention that the calorie is consumed. Based on this calorie, we are going for the consumption expenditure. Based on these calories, we are going for the consumption expenditure. Right. So when we are going for consumption expenditure, states are going to have different poverty line because every state eat different. And when the calorie consumed is consumption expenditure, we are going for a basket of commodities. Now, Tendulkar is using Alag's, right? This is Alag, what Alag committee has told. Tendulkar has used the same, right? Tendulkar is 2009. So, Rangarajan is 2012. Therefore, we will be saying that Rangarajan is somehow advanced compared to Tendulkar, right? Tendulkar and Rangarajan. Now, first when we are going for the Tendulkar. Now, the final thing is Tendulkar, Saxena, Rangarajan. And we are going to complete the poverty estimation in India. When we are going for the Tendulkar committee in 2009 and Saxena committee in 2009. Right. Now, Tendulkar committee shift from the calorie consumption based poverty estimation. Uniform poverty line basket across the rural and urban India. Now, there is a shift from the calorie consumption. How there is a shift? Because they are having a uniform basket. Plus health, plus education. Right. Previously, everybody was speaking about the calories. But he is speaking, yeah, uniform basket is somehow related to calories, plus health, plus education. So he is including three items. Therefore, the weightage of the calories, which was 100, has been given 33% of weightage, right? Uniform basket, and then we'll be having the health, and then we have the education. Shift away from the calorie consumption based poverty estimation. Uniform poverty line basket across the rural and the urban India. We have a uniform basket across. This is even across the rural and then the urban India. Rural are having a uniform basket and urban are having a uniform basket. Private expenditure, inclusion of the incorporation of the private expenditure on the health and education. Using mixed reference period, use based estimates instead of uniform reference period. The reference period is mixed instead of uniform, right? MRP instead of uniform reference period, URP. So they use MRP instead of the uniform reference period. Very simple. He is going to have a uniform basket plus health plus education, MRP instead of URP. Uniform basket, health, education, MRP instead of URP. Now, what is the poverty line of rupees 32 per capita per day in urban and in 27? Right. Highest is the urban and lowest is the rural. Saxena committee, it separated the caloric intake apart from national nominal income in its economic analysis of poverty. Saxena committee is telling like a fact, like 50% of the Indians lived below poverty line. It has separated the calorific value from the apart from the intake, calorie intake from the nominal income. Because sometimes we have income separately and people also can consume through their own source of food, right? So it has separated the calorie intake from the nominal income. Calorific intake from nominal income. 50% of the Indians live in poverty. Rangarajan is a methodology based on the independent survey of households by CMIE, used modified mixed reference period. Mixed reference period is for Tendulkar, modified mixed reference period. Right. Here the methodology is based on the independent. There is a large survey of the households by Center for Monitoring Indian Economy. This is a center for monitoring the Indian economy, right? They say that they have a center for monitoring the Indian economy. Now, calorific values, they are speaking about calories, protein, and then the fat. Then Rangarajan is speaking about calories, protein, and the fat. One person is Tendulkar and 5% is Rangarajan, right? Monthly expenditure of family of 5 members. Per capita expenditure of monthly. 32 per day per person and 27, 32, 27. You have like 47 and 32. Calorie value and calories, proteins and fat. 2400, 2100, right? 2155 and 2090. He just wants us to put a lot of efforts in remembering. That is why he gave like 2155, 2090. Right. Remaining all if you say 2100, this they could have round off in 2100, right? And this might be like 2150 or even 2200. But he wants us to put a little effort in remembering. That is why Rangarajan committee has given 2155 and 2090. Right. We have seen calories for urban and rural areas. Protein. Right. Protein, and then we have the fat as well. Now, protein and fat are greater for the rural. Protein is greater for the urban areas. Protein and fat are greater for the urban areas. Right. This is not needed. 32, 27, 47, 32. They include the expenditure on food, health, education, clothing, food, health, education, clothing, rent, transport, non-food items such as education. Right. These are the poverty estimation methods in India.